And welcome back to Frankly Speaking in conjunction with Mehi Rain. And joining me on the line tonight is my good friend, Julien DeMarco. How are you, Julien, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good, thanks. I appreciate you joining me tonight. And it was interesting because Julien sent me a text yesterday and he caught wind of a podcast um, by Timothy Gordon, Rules for Retrogrades, where they were talking about sort of the two income trap that many Americans have fallen into, Julien. And I know you had a reaction to this, the idea that we now need two incomes in order to support our household. It divides the family within, the idea that kids are being left out in the cold, and it brings sort of a moral sort of disability of sorts, or moral instability, I should say, to the family. It's something that I've seen throughout the course of my life as, we got to the 70s and then the 80s, and really, as women were forced out into the workforce in the 1970s because of the inflation of the 70s, you got a situation where there's no parents in the home. You got cable TV, rock music, and the porn industry now, which become mainstream raising our kids because there's no parents at home. And I guess the big question here is, in a usury system, or as the classical liberals would call it, a free market system where everything has become much more expensive. There's many Catholics out there saying that we need to break away from the two income household, reduce sort of our lives down to its most simplistic levels economically, and we need to keep wives in the home once again, as is custom and tradition throughout sort of Catholic sort of civilization. Julien, I know you listened to the cast, you had a reaction. What are your general thoughts?
Uh, my general thoughts are, well, I thought it was surprising that uh, Elizabeth Warren, faux Pocahontas, was, I believe, from what the podcast has said, was the one that came up with the term, or coined the term, the two income trap, which Timothy Gordon was saying, it was surprising that somebody like Elizabeth Warren would get something so right. She was 75% right, obviously, but everything else is wrong. But this was also during a time when Elizabeth Warren was not as crazy and off the bend as she is now. So, but I generally agree not only with Elizabeth Warren's assessment, but Timothy Gordon's assessment. But I think there's also, besides agreeing with both of them about the two income trap, I think people don't seem to understand that there's a correlation between liberal politics and the rise of this two income trap. If you notice, our world is, our society is becoming oversaturated with, there's more jobs than ever before, but yet people make less money than, but yet there's an abundance of jobs, but yet nobody seems to make any money. And also things are produced like insanely cheap, and nobody gets paid. So it's interesting because well, if you're married, there's this two income trap where both the man and the husband, sorry, the husband and the wife are both working. But this is also based off of, people being married. It doesn't really take into account about a person who isn't married, about a man who isn't married, who may be in an area where there aren't a lot of job opportunities, and he has to work 2 or 3 jobs. So there's a whole lot of factors that I think could be talked about, but I think there is something to be said about the two income trap.
Yeah, I found the discussion interesting, and I think it's a good topic to discuss. Like you, I found lots of value in what Mr. Gordon and his partner in that show were saying yesterday, and I think they hit on some important points, and I agree with. But there's sort of some nuances there that I think is difficult for me to accept because nobody, like you said, wants to talk about sort of the liberal policies that have sort of helped facilitate this two income gap and a lot of the other moral depravities of our time. And so I like to go through some of these arguments at its most basic level. And some of the things they're suggesting, Julian, which I kind of agree with, but I kind of don't agree with, is that Catholics, in order to avoid that two income gap, have to reduce their lifestyles down to bare minimum if you have to, in order to protect, again, your family and keeping your wife at home. They've said things like 2 cars in a household is a luxury. Televisions are a luxury. Cable TV is a luxury, right? Taking a yearly vacation or two are luxuries. And so it really sounded to me that one of the suggestions they were making is that from a financial, I guess, perspective, that Catholics, in order to make or bring back what was traditionally the one, income household with the man being the head of the house and the mother being able to stay home so she could raise children, is reduce Catholics should reduce themselves down materially to the lowest level that they can in order to make it happen, because that in and of itself will be a greater spiritual good. Make the grand sacrifices that we need in order for parents to stay home with their parents and raise proper and just families. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, so I agree and I don't agree that 2 cars is a luxury, but I don't necessarily, it is a luxury depending on what type of car the second car is. But sometimes it can also be a necessity. I mean, there are a lot of trad families, that whole funny thing about, that's a church fan. If you got like 6 or 7 or more kids, I mean, even in a modern full size sedan, you can probably fit at most comfortably 6. And if you got 7, you're gonna need a second car. I mean, you're not gonna want to always drive the church van, if you will, everywhere. So you need a second car. So the sedan is for the husband who goes to work or whatever the case may be, and then obviously the church van is for going to church or when all the kids are in the car. But at the same time, if you have one BMW, do you really need a second BMW? Just get an inexpensive car. So you already have one luxury car, one expensive car. And he is right. If you get a second car and you get a second job, and depending on the second car that you get, the second job, the wife's job, just ends up paying for the car. So you're using the second car just to go to work to pay for the second car. So that analogy that he comes up with, I think is very apt. So I definitely agree. But as I said, it can be a both and. A second car can be a necessity, but it can also be a luxury. Now, as he said, there are some trads that, get on him about having TV or whatever the case may be. I know lots of trads that don't have TVs, which is fine. I personally like a TV. I grew up with a TV. I don't think, no matter how traditional or orthodox I become, well, I don't know. But I can say for the moment, I'm going to have a TV. I'm going to watch TV. I don't think not having a TV is like. I understand for some people, for their spiritual benefit, not having a TV is fine. But there is no hard and fast rule by being Orthodox or traditionalist or whatever the case may be that you shouldn't have a TV. It's what you watch that is the problem. Having a TV, the TV is not the devil.
Yeah.
It's what you put on the TV that can let the devil in. So I
agree with you. It's okay. No, I agree with you completely. It's what you watch on TV. But I would add this: TVs, I don't consider those fancy luxuries. These electronic gadgets have been given to us, really, at will over the past 30, 40, 50 years. And they become relatively cheaper by the day. I mean, and so I don't know how much of a fancy luxury that really is. In regards to the second car, again, It's a maybe and we really have to define who the family is, what their conditions are, and what their intentions are. My general tendency is to say, in a globalist economy where we're all being spread apart constantly, where you listen, I'm from LA. You didn't find a job usually within 30 minutes of where you lived. You needed a car to travel, and then your spouse needed a car to travel, because it wasn't like we're living in an old Catholic village here where you're walking down to the mill, which is a mile away here. I mean, families travel, families are dispersed all over the country. We've all been forcibly split apart. I'm of the belief that a car is a necessity for every member of the household that is of, again, adult age. Everybody needs to be able to, again, function properly to get from A to B. I mean, even where I live now, my church is not within walking distance. It's not within biking distance. It's something that we have to get to and drive quite a bit of a distance for. It's modern society. Because, Julian, and let me just add this. What modern society has done, it has made it it has made it easier for us to travel in long distances. And this is why the way our cities are built, the way our cultures are built, it is naturally understood, especially in America, because the automobile has been seen and praised for the past 40, 50, 60 years as a piece of freedom, that it's understood that everybody should have their own car and you will drive to where you have to get, including your job or your family or whatever business you partake of. Distance is not a factor in employment anymore, unlike the old world where you just walked out into your farm, Julian, and you worked on your farm where you didn't need a vehicle. Vehicles are a necessity. Now, you brought up the luxury aspect. That's something completely different. If it is a matter of luxury and status symbol, I would agree with that.
Well, so the thing is, America is obviously a big country. So, as you pointed out, being in LA, you need a car to get someplace. For me, living here in Pittsburgh, my church is probably 15 minutes away. Well, Pittsburgh is a very walkable city if you want to walk. I've actually have walked to my church and back. It's taken me an hour to walk there and an hour to walk back, but it is feasible. But trying to get to mass on a Sunday dressed in a suit, I'm not walking, I'm driving. But that's not everybody. But the thing is, though, America is a very we build very spacious. Our cities are very sprawled out. They're not congested like European cities. The thing is, America, by its very nature, everybody in America likes space. And so we build far apart. It's not like in Europe where they build very close or very communal. And
up.
You can, or up. So you definitely you don't need a car necessarily in those countries. But in America, for a good deal of the country, you do need a car to get places. And if something happens, if the wife is at home and something happens with the child and she needs to take him to the emergency room and you're a one-car family, and let's just say, that you're not very close to your neighbors and the neighbors don't have a car, or all their cars are gone and all your friends are gone. This could be time is of the essence type of thing. And if she had her own car, instead of calling a bunch of people, she can just put him in the car and just go. So that there's also those things. Now, that type of thing is obviously a far and in between, but any parent knows children are constantly scraping their knees, breaking something and breaking themselves. So it's only a matter of time until there's that one incident where it's like a rush to the hospital type of thing.
Right.
So,
but let's take the emergency factor away from it. Shouldn't a wife at home be able to maneuver around town and just conduct her business in a way that she wants to take care of whatever the family needs? Is it really a situation where a woman has to sit at home constantly and wait for her husband to get home, who's worked all day, to go out and about and take care of just your average everyday duties? Or is that a sin because women want a car to be able to take care of their duties?
I don't know. I mean, I think there can sometimes be a Stepford wife mentality, a 1950s wife mentality, where the wife stays home and she
Right.
has these like full dresses on, and she has an apron, and mainly she's in the kitchen, and and the kids are out off at school somewhere, and she's reading some type of book or something. You know, the modern lady can still, I think, be traditional, not necessarily have all these feminist ideas, and not want to work, want to be a housewife, want to be a stay-at-home mom, but still also want to be able to go and if the kids aren't home and she doesn't want to watch TV or read a book, and she wants to go somewhere where she can't walk, she should be able to do that just as her husband can. Why does she have to wait for her husband to come home to be able to use the
Yeah.
car?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a problem. My wife drives. We have two vehicles. Actually, we have three vehicles. One we're handing down to our son now, which is something that's very important too. Because again, vehicles have a utilitarian purposes. My wife is my saving grace. If I ever get in trouble because I'm a sick man in a lot of ways, she's the first one I call. I can't leave her home or have her walking or riding a bike to work. She works in an office and things like that. And I like my wife to be independent in the sense, not independent like, okay, rebellion, but in the sense that she can take care of the business of the family, right? When I can't do that, especially as somebody that's sick. So I just think here we need to define what we mean by this, right? Because I guess here's the problem I'm having with the argument, the discussion that they had. They set up once again this idealistic scenario, right? If your husband is making $200,000 a year, there's no reason for women to buy BMW and do this and do this and do this. But that's kind of a given, right? As Catholics, we've been taught that materialism and the worship of material items is an idol of sorts. But the vast majority of people, like I said on my podcast yesterday on this very topic, the average household income is about $60,000 a year, Julian. That's all it is. And we got a situation where women are working. And if women are working and men are working to combine to support the household, you're going to need at least two vehicles in a household in order for your wife to get back and forth and the husband to get back and forth in that
One of
respect,
the
right?
one of the things I don't think they touched on is how, but we've touched on this, and I've had it in other conversations with other people, is that the majority of items that we use every day, or like a house or cars or lots of things, are based on two incomes. It is assumed that you have a second income to help finance something, like a mortgage, for example, or a car loan, or which is why whenever you're going for a car loan, if you're married, it's like, put your wife's information, put her credit score, does she work? It's like, well, and then they combine it. Even if you're the one, like if you're married and you want to get a car and you want to just do it on your own, you know, what is yours is hers, and what is hers is yours. But from a car financing standpoint, you don't have to like both go in on getting this car. You can do it, but if you're married, you're still going to have to put down your wife's information. And if she
Yeah.
works, they're still going to take that her income into account. It won't just be yours.
Yeah.
And then you'll both be responsible for the car, even if you're the one that wants it and she doesn't want it. But you're the one who's going to want it, and you're the one who's going to use it 90% of the time. Things in society are built on two incomes, and so it's almost in, in, impassable to try and operate on this mindset of just a one income. Again, the one income is ideal, and I know lots of people that do it. I don't know necessarily their financial situation. I know the types of jobs that they have, and I'm assuming that that they're making 60,000 or more, but they also typically, I am assuming, because I know them enough, that they tend to live within their means. Also, they live in Western Pennsylvania. Western
Right.
Pennsylvania is not that expensive. I mean, $60,000 here in Pennsylvania can take is almost like having could be not could almost be like having $90,000 here, as
Right.
opposed to $60,000 in LA. You're at poverty level. You're literally, you can't afford anything at 60,000.
Yeah, and I think that's the way most Americans are living now. I think it's a lot of people are paycheck to paycheck. We got inflation kicking in. We've had the cost of housing skyrocket over the past. Well, it's always going up, but really over the past 5 to 7 years, education is ridiculous. Healthcare is one thing I talk about a whole lot because we have a combination of a corporatist sort of government alliance to subsidize healthcare to the vast majority of Americans. Because if you left it up to the markets, right, the free markets, most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, would not be able to afford their own healthcare, right? I mean, we got a situation right now. I believe the federal government takes care of 50% of everybody's healthcare, right? When you
Yeah, I mean,
Medicaid and children's programs for healthcare, I mean, it only goes to
yeah,
show you just healthcare alone, right? This whole thing, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. There's lots of nuances to this economy, and
yeah.
Americans aren't making it.
I mean, so for healthcare, for example,
Mhm.
I typically do not get healthcare unless it's provided to me by my insurer. I mean, with all the healthcare regulations and whatnot, I'm glad that the Obama thing is done. But I mean, I'm relatively young. I'm below 45 and healthy, and I have no wife or children. And I don't mind paying things out of pocket, because actually it is cheaper for me to pay things out of pocket, because even if I get the bare bones minimum health insurance, because I did when I was mandated to get it, the bare bones for me, I was paying almost $300 in insurance a month for crap, for nothing.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous. I'm one person. I'm not paying that. I'm not paying that much money. And then it's just, and so like there's other health insurances that are like cheaper depending on where you go, but then again, it's still crap. I'm paying for something that I get nothing out of.
Okay. Okay. So let's shift this way. This is where I want to take the conversation. Because what the answer has been by a lot of trad Catholics in dealing with this issue of the woman being pushed out into the workforce, no parents in the home, is the idea that we basically need to live in squalor in order to serve the Lord, right? It's a sacrifice that we offer the Lord in order to, again, try and function in a way where
I
our
just
moral
can
principles.
I just say this?
Yes.
A lay Catholic is not bound to live in poverty.
Well,
If you
see,
want to make
that's
if you want to make 100 million a year and live in a $20 million house, by all
right.
means. If that's what you want and you can do it, and you do it in a way that is not offending God or
Yeah.
man, by all means, make $100 million and live in that
Yeah.
$20 million house. You don't have. Yes, there is glorification in poverty, but there is nothing wrong with wanting to have comforts. Now, worshiping the fact that you make $100 million and worshiping the
Yeah.
fact that you live in a $20 million house is wrong. But if that's just something that you want and you know it's not something that you need, then there's a difference.
Right.
You don't have to live, you don't have to be in squalor. I don't think people seem to understand this.
Yeah, and I think that's where the trans would go is say, in order to, be a good Catholic, right? I've even heard some Catholics tell me that poverty is a privilege, right? That's the idea that, the Holy Family and our Lord lived in poverty. They accepted their lot in life. They accepted their cross, so to speak. And we're supposed to accept our cross as well, too, in that respect. And listen, I got no problem with God's permissive will in the sense that if this is what God wants in that respect, you accept the cross, whatever he throws at you, whether it's a financial cross or a physical cross whatever it may be, right? But I don't like the message that a lot of Catholics give out there, and that is that you have to live in squalor in order to be a good Catholic. And that's what I sense sometimes, Julian. And I think it
Yeah,
kind
I
of goes
mean,
too far, and it's off-putting for a lot of people, especially
oh, it's
because we live in a society, Julian. We live in a society where everybody else around us in a secular society doesn't have the same moral compass. And I've even heard, I believe, I don't know if it was the catechism or one of the saints, I don't remember now, but the church has taught that in certain extreme situations where people suffer from extreme financial burdens, it could have a negative effect on our soul. And the church has taught that workers have rights, that we have a basic standard of living that we can all abide by, and that we have the dignity and deserve to deserve in that respect. And yet a lot of times in the trad community, it's like live in poverty, accept your cross, and that's it. And
yeah.
I
I mean,
find that difficult.
I do too. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. I have suffered, like, since I've become an adult, I have suffered bouts of homelessness. Um, and I didn't grow up necessarily poor. My parents weren't together, but I never grew up. If I wanted something, I knew I would get it. But as an adult, and the family situation with my family was, I did not have a very good relationship with my family, and I was in a very precarious situation financially, being young and being unskilled and not having a lot of work experience. It was a struggle for me to be able to put a roof over my head, and sometimes I wasn't able to. And I've been poor, and I don't want to be poor. And I don't think there is any, and I like nice things, and I am going to buy nice things for myself. And I don't think it's wrong that I want nice things, and I want to live in a nice neighborhood, and I want my family to have nice things. When my wife says, hey, let's go on a vacation and it's going to cost like $2,000, I want to be able to say, you know what, let's do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm not going to be made to feel like I'm committing some type of sin or that I'm not a good Catholic. No, I've been poor, I've been there, done that, and I'm going to live my life. And I think, I think people do go a little too poor. I'm sorry, a little too idolatrous with this. We all got to be poor. We all got to be poor. We all got to be poor. Well, hello, excuse me. I didn't sign up to be a Franciscan. If you did, that's fine. You go be poor. But I'm not a Franciscan. I'm not out here for being all for poverty. Now, I understand the whole spiritual benefit, but at the same time, as you pointed out, if it is a fact, if you are too busy worrying about putting a roof over your head and feeding yourself and your family, you care less about your spiritual life, because you need to worry about right now. You can't worry about what happens when you die, because if you don't feed yourself, you're going to die. And so, again, it's that the needs, the needs of life. You need food and shelter. If you cannot provide those things, or if those things are too hard because you're too busy living in poverty, the spiritual benefit, the worrying about your soul takes a back seat to all of it.
Yeah, because there's a balance between the natural and the supernatural, and we are flesh and blood, right? And we have concerns of this world, especially those of us that are raising families. Now, I will agree with the notion that, listen, if you're pushing your wife out to the workforce in order to enjoy excessive luxuries, I think that's a very valid discussion to have. And I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of women, in fact, reject having children because of the focus on their careers. To me, that's a massive mortal sin, by the way. And so there are, again, nuances, you want to call it. There are different. We got to look at every situation a little, carefully and examine them. But see, this is what I want to talk about, is not necessarily, again, the hypothetical, those that are making money and have learned to worship materialism. I want to talk about the average Joe every day struggling to make ends meet, and how far are they supposed to go in order to be able to make it. And whether, in that respect, if they're sending their wives out into the workforce and their income goes from 60,000 a year down to 30,000 a year, can you realistically raise a family? No. And here's the other factor here. The other side of the coin is the classical liberals, who oftentimes I sense traditionalists have adopted classical liberal values. On one hand, if a man is working his butt off, but is simply not making the proper income or enough income to raise his family, obviously in a secular society with a big welfare state, a lot of people go to the government for assistance, and we see it in various ways now at this point in history. But here's the kicker: if a man were to stay home, right, and in order to supplement that income to raise his family, he were to go to the government to make up for what his wife doesn't bring home, because like you said, we presume it's a two-income kind of situation now in this country, those same classical liberals will look at that man and say, you're lazy. You're going to the government. You're not supposed to go to the government. Shame on you. You're stealing from your neighbor, Julian. That's what the classical liberals usually come back with. So everywhere you turn here, Julian, if you send your wife to work, you're sinning. But if you keep your wife home and go to the welfare state, you're sinning as well, too, according to a lot of these people. Where do you go with this?
Well, I mean, it's not like you can go to the church and be put on the dole. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
What churches these days, I mean, they give you a one-off sometimes, if they have, even if they have like this one-off benefit, they give you a one-off benefit, but that's a one-off thing. It doesn't help you in the long term. I mean, because all of what the church used to do, being on the church's dole and all of that type of stuff, is now you're on the government dole, because the government does all of what the church used to do. So
that's right.
Where are you supposed to go? And I mean, as it's supposed to be, you go to your family, to your family first, then your friends, then church, then the government. But yet we immediately go to the government.
Right, but Julian, your family lives in the same usury system. Most family members are struggling to pay their mortgage and trying to raise their families. That's how much. You see, this is the problem that we have here, and this is something I've explained to classical liberals, right? You've taken away the church from a position of authority where the church had a grand social system, a social net, not only to help them in a natural sense, a material sense, but the church could also teach morality to these people, which oftentimes a lot of the dysfunctions that we see of people in poverty is a moral or spiritual dysfunction. The church used to be able to fix that. Now that the church is not in play anymore, who's there to fix a lot of these social dysfunctions that leaves people out in the cold? Nobody. The government's not going to teach you proper and just morality. They're not going to do that. So you got a system here. You've removed the church as the basis and the core backbone of society as a whole, and you left us government. Where do you think people are going to go when they need help? They're going to go to the government. They're not going to go to the churches anymore. You guys wiped those things out a long time ago. That's the irony of it all here. And yet it's these classical liberals that are first to complain. Can't go to the government, got to go to family. Your families are paying the debt notes too. They're in the same usury system. The church wants nothing to do with you. In fact, the church is taking money from the government on a lot of issues themselves. And finally, all you got left is a government that's willing to help you. How is this supposed to work out in the end, Julian? Where do people go?
I mean, it's again, you go to the government. I mean, because the government is everything. The government.
Daddy.
They're our daddy for real. I mean, the one thing, when people are like, when they hear like I'm a monarchist and I don't like the welfare state or all of these other things, and it's just like, well, then how are we supposed to have all these safety nets or anything like that if the government is supposed to be really limited and minimal, and the king just only does these certain things, and there's not this huge faceless bureaucracy and all this paperwork? Well, where are we supposed to go if, the mother of 10 needs money? The church, because that's not the government's job. The government's job is to make sure that people outside aren't trying to get in that shouldn't be coming in, and people inside the country are doing what they're supposed to do. If you're a mother of 10 and you need help, then you go to the church. That the government can help. The government can set up programs, but ultimately that's the church's domain, and so they should be the one to be taking care of you. The government should not be having. And when you have this, when you have a social welfare state like this, the government has more power over your life.
Does. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it does. We've surrendered that a long time ago, and that's why government's become our sugar daddy. And really, in that respect, once you take down the church and the social structure of the old world, and the only thing the classical liberals gave us was a government. Now they would argue, well, it's supposed to be a limited government. Where were you expecting people to go? Right, especially when we've transitioned from this agricultural society where families could take care of each other now to this post-industrial usury system where everybody's in debt. Can't bring people into your house generally because the houses we build now are just basic utilitarian kind of homes in order just to rest our heads. Most people now, in fact, where I'm living at, and I know a few friends that are in the construction business, some that are inspectors, we're turning into a condo society in order to help manage some of these massive mortgages, the cost of housing that's become impossible for a lot of people at this point in history. My point is that we're not structured in a way where families can't even help each other anymore. It doesn't work that way. Now, some families that are smart and prudent have put themselves in that position, but generally the trend we're going, it is a big government that's going to be there to help everybody. Is that good? We can judge, but that's all we have now is a government, and that's where everybody understands, and it's where everybody goes to at this point in history. So, to bring it back around, Julian, I guess, as we start to wrap this up, as we think about what this means, and the two, I guess, income trap, I think there's some good points that are being made. I think we can all agree that once the woman went out into the workforce starting in the 60s and the 70s, it changed the trajectory of the family. We've seen the family really fall apart ever since feminism rose and the woman went out into the workforce, right? We've seen the rise of porn and broken families and illegitimacy and out of wedlock births and divorces. I mean, there's been a lot of problems here without a doubt. But the question at the end of the day is, we do live in a usury system, and most incomes, what we consider, household incomes, are not enough at the end of the day. Again, you can complain about women being pushed out, or at least women going out into the workforce and destroying the family. But at the end of the day, if you're supporting the liberal policies that forced women out in the first place, I guess it's hard for me to take you seriously.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many conservatives and so many men, secular or religious, that sees no issue with a woman going and working, and you support this. So you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. You can't say, "Oh, women shouldn't work," and then at the same time tell your daughter, well, I mean, you can tell your daughter she can be anything she wants, but also be realistic. She can't be, nor could your son. There are so many. If everybody is a CEO and if everybody's a doctor and everybody's a lawyer, who's building the office that the lawyer is going to be in? We can't all be a country of lawyers and doctors, and nor should we be.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have those that slip to the bottom echelons of the sort of the economic ladder of success. America is, and I will give it credit in the sense that it has a fluid class system. I just think the greatest flaw in the American system of economics is that we've never taken true and just morality into account when we look at, again, some of the factors within economic activity in this country. I go back to what I said. It's funny to me how we've accepted the notion that when kids in this country turn 18, they're going to go to college, They're going to do the sex. They're going to do the drugs. They're going to do the rock and roll. They're going to make all kinds of mistakes that we're not supposed to ask about, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, kind of a thing. And then we expect them to come out of college and this early life experience of sexual experimentation and all types of dubious behavior. And somehow they're going to make it out okay and be good citizens because they're going to go out there and make the money in America. And as I keep saying, Julian, I look around and I don't think everything is okay. Morality is completely broken down, and that eventually reflects the economic system. And the chickens are coming home to roost. Here's the bottom line: what a lot of people don't want to talk about. There's a whole host of Americans that are incapable of taking care of themselves financially at this point in history. It's why the government has had to come in and subsidize large portions of our lives, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's welfare programs, whether it's WIC programs, whether it's this subsidy, that subsidy. The government is in the business of taking care of its citizens financially. The welfare state is never going anywhere. The question is, can we as Catholics find a way to kind of beat the system as best we can, try to keep our wives at home, try to keep women at home, and try to raise our families with proper moral order? I think the sort of the pool of that idea is shrinking. But definitely, I agree with these gentlemen yesterday that it's an important value that we strive for. I just disagree with some of the more nuanced arguments because the liberal policies have made it almost impossible for the average family to break free from that and to keep a woman at home. Unless we change trajectory economically, reject liberalism, I don't think there's an easy fix, my friend. Your final thoughts?
No, I don't think it's going to be an easy fix unless we reject all these liberal policies and, get rid of some of these government handouts. Like, for one, the Ponzi scheme that is Social Security needs to go. I mean, why am I paying for something that by the time that I need to use it will not be able to be there for me? And the fact that, the amount of money that you get on Social Security, that's not enough to survive. So there's so, I think what we really should be doing in order to alleviate having to have women go out into the workforce is get rid of Social Security, get rid of all these social safety nets, at least 50% of them. Bare minimum, slim it down. And we need to really make an emphasis with our parishes and with our churches and with our dioceses that there needs to be more of that old world church safety net, housing shelters, and programs to help people when they get into financial distress, and so that the first, well, when there's something that happens, the first thing isn't, oh, let's call the government or see what the government is doing, but let's see what our church has to offer first.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will agree with you in the sense that I believe we should give Social Security to all those that have been promised. I think a system that weans us off the system, a privatized system, would be much healthier in general moving forward. But again, the powers that be are never going to let that happen. It just won't, because there's too much control of the system itself that entities have over our lives, and that's at the end game. And that's what a lot of, I think, our friends on the right don't see, is the actual power brokers here that don't care about these ideological differences between the left and the right, but rather they want power and control over our lives. I think people that we're promised Social Security deserve it. I think we need to take care of our elderly. I think we need to take care of our disabled and our sick. I think we need to take care of our children who have been brought up in broken families. I think there's a lot of issues that our society that we're responsible for as a citizenry because we've raised people in sort of the threshold of liberalism, which has brought a big element of human brokenness, right? Even when we talk about something like the elderly, for example, in the old world, families took care of each other, right? You have children, you take care of your children, but at old age, it was the children take care of their mom and dad. We've distanced ourselves from that for this concept of individual liberty, right? We just expect somebody else. Now, mom and dad, you didn't put in your 401k, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. This is the familial line that the old world broke down, and now we're paying the consequences, but we do have to take care of those people. So bottom line is, I agree with the sentiments of these two gentlemen over at Rules for Renegades, Mr. Timothy Gordon, who I think is a good Catholic. But I think the discussion is more nuanced, and it needs a little bit more unraveling and sort of context to really, break this down to find what is right and wrong here. So, my friend Julien, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, my friend. This is Frank signing off. I want to thank Julien DeMarco of the May He Rain vlog who joined me tonight. Great discussion. We'll talk to you soon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Frank signing off, or frankly speaking. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.